Hi, this is Angela Null, and this is the MSF, Doctors Without Borders South Africa HIV/AIDS campaign. Some background information about MSF. It was founded on December 22nd, 1971 in Paris, France. Its founders include 13 doctors and journalists. Its international headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland, and it is considered an international humanitarian medical non-governmental organization, an NGO. Other background information. MSF has offices in 21 countries, and it also operates 7 branch offices in Argentina, the Czech Republic, India, Ireland, Mexico, South Korea, and the United Arab Emirates. Mission. The mission of Doctors Without Borders, also known as MSF, is to provide impartial medical relief to the victims of war, disease, and natural or man-made disaster, without regard to race, religion, or political affiliation. Vision. It aims to alleviate suffering, protect life and health, and to restore respect for human beings and their fundamental human rights. We provide medical care in emergencies, assisting the most vulnerable people in crisis due to conflict, and when necessary, exposing obstacles that we encounter in the course of that work. Values. To provide medical care where it is needed most. At the core of Doctors Without Borders' identity is a commitment to independence, reliance on private donations from public, neutrality in a situation that involves conflict, sides are not taken, impartiality. Free medical care is provided to those who need it, regardless of nationality, religious belief, or political affiliation. People are simply considered human beings in need. The commitment to these principles awarded Doctors Without Borders the Nobel Prize in 1999. Doctors Without Borders opportunity. Since the discovery of HIV/AIDS in 1981, more than 32 million people have died as a result of infection. The WHO estimates that there are currently more than 34 million people living with HIV/AIDS across the world. The majority of HIV-positive individuals reside in sub-Saharan Africa. The South African region of sub-Saharan Africa has the highest HIV epidemic in the world. It is estimated that more than 7.7 million people, 20.4% of the general population, is living with HIV/AIDS. South Africa, a brief history of its political system. South Africa operated under a policy of segregation and apartheid until 1994, in which blacks were denied South African citizenship and were deprived of their right to vote, strike, build homes in urban areas, and by law could not compete for jobs held by whites. Thus, apartheid gave political, agricultural, industrial, economic, military, and social power to the white minority. In 1999, South Africa held its first democratic election, which was won by the ANC candidate Nelson Mandela. Today, the head of government and national legislature representatives are elected through fair and free elections. Independent candidates are not allowed to run for national office. However, the Congress of the People is currently sponsoring a law that would change that policy. South Africa has suffered widespread corruption within the ANC, including the buying of votes and bribing of political officials. South Africa's current president, Ramaphosa, is dedicated to cleaning up the corruption and interference of non-elected actors within South Africa's political system. The current president, Ramaphosa, serves as both the head of state and the head of government in South Africa. Since 1994, the Republic of South Africa operates as a constitutional democracy with a 3-tier system of government and an independent judiciary. Its national, provincial, and local levels of government have legislative and executive authority in their own spheres. The government is committed to building a free, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, united South Africa. The Political System and the Freedom in the World Index 2019. It scored a 79 out of 100. Its political rights are considered 33 out of 40, and its civil liberties are 46 out of 60. And these are just some fun facts about South Africa's constitution. The Corruption Perception Index. Scoring 44 out of 100 on the Corruption Index scale indicates that South Africa is a relatively corrupt region in sub-Saharan Africa, thus indicating that South Africa's public sectors are threatened by corruption, bribery, and extortion. South Africa also suffers from a high crime rate. These are just some crime rate statistics that I included from 2018 through 2019. As you can see, the contact crimes has gone up 2.6%, contact-related crimes has gone up 1.6%, and other serious crimes have gone up 1.4%. Quick facts about South Africa's economy. The population is 56.5 million. The GDP is $765.6 billion. They have $13,545 per capita. Unemployment is at 27.6%, and the upper bound poverty line is at 55.5%. Some positives are that South Africa is considered the leading economic power and one of the most developed countries in Africa, due to its abundance of natural resources and highly developed financial, legal, communications, energy, and transportation infrastructures. Some negatives are that South Africa suffers from both high unemployment and poverty rates. In fact, it is estimated that approximately 30.4 million South Africans, over half of the population, are living in poverty. Economic empowerment is lacking amongst the Black natives in South Africa, as most of the population suffers from crime, corruption, and HIV/AIDS. Here's a chart of South Africans' poverty by demographic. South Africa's economic freedom status. In 2018, it was a 63.0, and in 2019, it dropped 4.7 points to 58.3 due to declines in judicial effectiveness, fiscal health, property rights, government integrity, and investment freedom. Its economic freedom status continued. Although its regional score is above regional average, its overall score is considered below the world average. World ranking, 102. Regional ranking, 11. Here's a continuation of those economic freedom scores. South Africa is ranked 11th on the Economic Freedom Index scale among the 47 other countries in the sub-Saharan African region. From 2000 through 2018, Africa's economic freedom was considered moderately free. However, as of 2019, it is currently considered mostly unfree. South Africa's literacy rates. The literacy rates in South Africa have steadily increased from 2007 through 2015. And to the right is a chart of those totals by gender. A continuation of literacy rates. Demographics. Over 80% of South Africa's population is Black. 60% of Blacks in South Africa are considered literate. 7.9% of South Africa's population is white. More than 90% of whites in South Africa are literate. And to the right, you can see a global map of that and the percents in changes. South Africa's media history. The media environment in South Africa after apartheid moved from one of the most oppressed media systems in the world to the freest in the sub-Saharan African region. Today, South Africa successfully houses a media landscape in which the freedom of expression and the press are protected under its constitution. South African journalists have the freedom to criticize the government, scrutinize its actions, and share their own opinions, both good and bad, about the country's political leaders, without fear of imprisonment or large fines. South Africa houses the following languages. Of them, Afrikaans and English are the most widely used. South African newspapers can be traced back to white settlement in South Africa in the 1600s. Newspapers in South Africa are primarily printed in the Afrikaans and English languages. The Sunday Times is the largest and most influential weekly paper and has a circulation of between 450,000 and 500,000 papers per week. Radio and television broadcast in the 11 recognized languages and are the most popular means of receiving news and other information. The South African Broadcasting Company is recognized as the state broadcaster and operates 3 free national and 2 paid television stations that are accessible to more than half of the South African population. The SABC radio network is state-owned and operates 18 stations. Over 100 community-based radio stations extend coverage to rural areas. South Africa and its 2019 Press Freedom Index. It scores a 31 out of 180 countries. Thus, South Africa's press freedom is guaranteed, but it is considered fragile. The 2009 World Press Freedom decline in ranking and global score is due to state agencies reportedly spying on journalists, reportedly tapping journalists' phones, and journalists being harassed for covering issues involving the ANC party, government financials, and corruption. As a result, journalists have experienced an increase in abusive language and hate speech. The total number of journalists, citizen journalists, and media assistants killed as of 2020, though, is 0. And here is a mapping of that World Press Freedom Index from 2019. As you can see, South Africa in yellow is in a satisfactory situation. South Africa's internet penetration. Internet penetration in South Africa has expanded rapidly. There are active internet users of 36.54 million, active mobile internet users of 34.93 million, active social media users of 22 million, active mobile social media users of 21.56 million, and they spend approximately 8 hours and 25 minutes on devices per day. Internet freedom continued. South Africa's internet freedom score is a 72 out of 100, indicating that it is mostly free. According to 2018 statistic reports, 65% of South African households have at least one member accessing internet at home, work, school, and/or cafes. And here's just a chart of the social media usage in South Africa. Most use Facebook. Hofstede's cultural dimensions. In terms of power distance, South Africa scores a 49 on Hofstede's power distance dimension scale. Therefore, South Africa accepts a hierarchical order in which everyone has a place. I do want to note before I go further that the scores of Hofstede's cultural dimensions reflect only the white population of South Africa, and as a result, scores may differ from those above when taking the Black African population into account. Individualism. South Africa scores a 65 on Hofstede's individualism dimension scale. Therefore, South Africa prefers a more individualist social framework in which individuals care more for themselves and their immediate family members. However, African cultures are generally considered collectivist and value the group's welfare as more important. Thus, South Africa is likely a mix of individualist and collectivist cultures. Masculinity. South Africa scores a 63 on Hofstede's masculinity dimension scale. Therefore, South Africa is a masculine society in which competition drives achievement and success. Uncertainty avoidance. South Africa scores a 49. Therefore, South Africa has a low preference for avoiding uncertainty. This is an indication that societies are more relaxed in their attitudes and deviation from norms is more acceptable. Long-term orientation. South Africa scores a 34 on this dimension scale. Therefore, South Africa's culture is considered more normative than pragmatic. People generally display concerns with establishing absolute truths and traditions are respected. Indulgence. South Africa scores a 63 on Hofstede's indulgence dimension scale. Therefore, the culture is indulgent, indicating that they embrace their impulses and desires. South Africa's society is generally optimistic and believes that leisure time should be spent as they wish. Again, I just want to note that the scores on this cultural dimension scale only reflect white populations of South Africa, so they may differ when taking into account the Black population, which, by the way, is the majority of the population. Let's get into the campaign. Doctors Without Borders, Bending the Curves, the door-to-door fight against HIV. The timetable. It began in 2011 in an urban town and a rural town in the provinces of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. Since 2011, MSF's Bending the Curves campaign has collaborated with the KwaZulu-Natal Department of Health, the DOH, to help South Africa reach the UNAIDS global target of 90-90-90, and that will be further explained in other slides. Output objectives: to provide free testing and other medical services by means of mobile transportation directly to educational facilities and other areas of high transmission within communities. To provide HIV-positive individuals with the information they need to know about living with HIV/AIDS. To encourage HIV-positive individuals to seek the medical care they need in order to live longer, healthier lives. To provide counseling and support services to HIV-positive individuals that are having a difficult time coping with their illness, thus to ensure that individuals living with HIV know their status, are placed on treatment, and retained in care with a suppressed viral load. Impact objectives. The Bending the Curves project aims to reduce the incidence of new HIV infections while reducing the morbidity and mortality rates associated with the disease. 90% of all living with HIV will know their status. 90% of all living with HIV will receive antiretroviral therapy. And 90% of all receiving antiretroviral therapy will have viral suppression. That's the UNAIDS strategy for 2020. Key messages. New HIV infections can be prevented if people know their status. The promotion of treatment as prevention, in which HIV-positive patients began treatment irrespective of their CD4 T-cell counts, through an initiative to reduce HIV sickness and mortality rates. Implementing the WHO's Test and Start approach, which endorses a lifelong provision of antiretroviral therapy, also known as ART, to all HIV-positive pregnant and breastfeeding women. Implementations. Increasing access to medical male circumcisions. MMC was promoted in educational institutions by MSF volunteers. MMC reduces the risk of sexual transmission of HIV by 60%. Through MSF's partnership with the National Department of Health and the Southern African Clothing and Textile Workers Union, MSF successfully provided greater access for males to MMCs in both of these regions. Transportation to and from home was provided to males who elected to have the procedure at DOH facilities that performed MMCs with the collaboration of the SACTWU doctors who carried out the surgical procedures. In addition, MSF provided counselors, and DOH provided both nurses and lunches to males undergoing the procedure. Implementations. Increasing condom distribution. 2012 to 2015, MSF distributed between 800,000 and 1 million condoms per year. In 2016, MSF distributed 733,000 condoms in 6 months. In addition, colored condoms and flavored condoms were distributed to youth as an alternative to standard condoms to make the practice of safe sex seem more appealing. Other implementations included HIV community testing. Over-the-counter self-test kits in May of 2015 were approved by the Pharmacy Council of South Africa. Mobile site testing. In 2011, MSF launched the One-Stop Shop, M1SS, mobile testing unit to provide HIV information, counseling, screening, testing, pregnancy testing, condom distribution, and health promotion to farms, schools, taxi ranks, churches, local businesses, and community events. Standalone testing. In 2012 of August, 4 fixed sites that provide identical services to M1SS were established and staffed in both regions. Door-to-door HIV testing. In October of 2012, MSF began the Community Health Agents Program to provide HIV counseling and testing door-to-door in rural and peri-urban areas. These are the primary and secondary publics, demographics and psychographics. For mobile sites, the majority of patients were females. These are the primary and secondary publics, demographics and psychographics for standalone sites. Again, you can see that the majority of patients were females. Primary and secondary publics, demographics, and psychographics for door-to-door. Again, you can see the majority were females. Primary and secondary publics results. Testing at facilities ranks the highest because they typically test more patients that are more ill and symptomatic. Testing at standalone sites within the community ranks second. Testing at mobile sites within the community ranks third. Overall, door-to-door testing yielded the highest number of tests, but the lowest prevalence among publics. Here is a video of the campaign.
MSF started in Ashawi in 2011, and one of the reasons we chose this area is it has both an urban area and a large population living in rural areas.
Our partnership with MSF, it's coming with a new strategy whereby they take the services from the offices to the community.
The mobile unit can then go to areas of high risk of transmission, including farms and schools, high schools, and the local community college. Community-based testing is essential to reach patient populations that you often don't see in facilities.
Namhlanje ngithatha isinqumo sokuthi ngizochecka inogane igazi. Okwenza ngizochecka lapha and waste imali ukugibela ekliniki and clinic futhi ufica ulayini omningi kakhulu uthatha isikhathi eside uchecka igazi efishane kakhulu.
Namhlanje ngikhethe ukuhlolela igciwane lesondela ngculaza ngoba la endaweni yangakithi ama-clinics akude and la aba-MSF bakwenza kube easy for abadlalazi ukuthi bekwazi ukuthesta.
We test about 12,000 to 17,000 people every 3 months.
Uma be-check-a basuke bezo-check-a i-TB ne-HIV. Emva kalokho bayasikhuthaza ukuthi masiye eklinikhi ukuze sikwazi ukuthi siqhubeke nempilo. Uma ngabe sehambile ku-MSF, mina engisuke sengusalela ukuthi ngisaphothe lowo mntwana mhlawumbe otholakala ukuthi u-HIV positive and akakwazi ukuthi abhekane nesimo. So ngikhonela ukuthi ngisaphothe abantwana. As they are coming from the community, they are going to be the future leaders. They are going to lead their own families.
Media and channels, mobile phones. South African mobile ownership of 82.9% and mobile network coverage of 98% led MSF to implement text message reminders to patients that test positive for HIV to visit a healthcare facility. Text messages are sent to HIV positive individuals once a week over a 3-month duration as a follow-up initiative to remind them to seek counseling and other healthcare services. Hotlines. The Stop Stockouts Coalition is a national hotline that MSF created so that patients and healthcare providers can report medicine unavailability or shortages at healthcare facilities. The Stop Stockouts Coalition also attempts to survey each public health facility in South Africa to collect data for annual reports. Output strategies: the antiretroviral therapy programs, facility clubs and community clubs. Counselors lead groups of approximately 30 patients that meet every other month at facilities for art collection and annually for clinical consultation. Community art groups comprised of 3 to 8 HIV-positive individuals led by a patient that rotate visiting the facility for 2 monthly art collections and a yearly clinical consultation. Central chronic medicine dispensing and distribution. HIV-positive patients are given a DOH-approved pickup point where they can receive their medications on a monthly basis. The SWOT of the campaign: strengths. Since MSF began working in South Africa in 1986, this indicates that there's a healthy and lengthy relationship with the country. Staff in 2018, 282, thus indicating that MSF has several doctors, nurses, and other volunteers supporting eradication efforts of HIV/AIDS in South Africa. The expenditure in 2018 was $12.4 million, thus indicating that it is well funded and provided with the resources it needs to reach mass populations. Weaknesses: the South African government funding for HIV/AIDS is limited and heavily reliant on international donor support. Hundreds of thousands of people continue to die from advanced HIV/AIDS because clinics are ill-equipped to detect and treat people with advanced stages of the disease. Through the integration of MSF's mobile, standalone, and door-to-door testing initiatives, men were less likely than women to receive HIV testing. Opportunity: in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, 1 in 4 people between the ages of 15 and 59 is HIV positive, thus giving MSF the opportunity to offer testing, counseling, and medical care to HIV-positive individuals. Access to a large percentage of mobile phone users, thus giving MSF the opportunity to send text message reminders to HIV-positive individuals to seek medical care from clinics. Access to a large percentage of mobile network coverage, thus giving MSF the opportunity to reach the population and record data from testing locations. Access to a large percentage of internet users. Threats: more than 95% of MSF funds are raised from the generosity of private individual donors. While this gives an unrivaled level of independence, it also means that without the support of private donations, that continued operation and success of mobile and standalone testing sites are at risk. MSF relies heavily on its collaborations with other NGOs, traditional leaders, South Africa's government, and the community. Evaluation of the campaign: the mobile unit, standalone unit, and door-to-door testing. Successfully provided the community with accessible testing locations both in urban and rural areas. Successfully provided children in schools with the opportunity to learn about HIV/AIDS and how to prevent the spread of the disease. Successfully engaged the community through its mobilization efforts by reducing the stigma around the disease, by increasing individuals' knowledge of the epidemic. Results: 12,000 to 17,000 people are tested every 3 months. Circumcisions: through MSF's recruitment, 2,872 circumcisions were performed in 2014, and through MSF's recruitment, 2,079 circumcisions were performed in 2015. Door-to-door testing: 56,183 people were tested for HIV in 2015. 1,682 new infections were diagnosed in 2015. Community clubs, counseling programs, support groups, and art groups. MSF provides HIV-positive individuals with counseling services, support groups, easily accessible medication pickups, and annual evaluations with healthcare professionals throughout the duration of their medical treatments. In 2018, MSF conducted a survey and confirmed that the project had exceeded the UNAIDS 90-90-90 targets for 2020, making Eshowe and Momongawe, KwaZulu-Natal's provinces, the first areas in South Africa to not only reach but also exceed the 2020 targets. MSF's 2018 survey concluded that 90% of all people living with HIV knew their status, 94% of all people diagnosed with HIV were receiving sustained antiretroviral treatment, and 95% of all people receiving antiretroviral therapy were virally suppressed. The results display that the Bending the Curves campaign initiatives were so successful that 90-90-90 targets for 2020 were reached 1 year ahead of the projected deadline. Lessons learned. MSF's community-based outreach testing initiatives in South Africa significantly increased the amount of people in the overall population being tested, identified individuals at an earlier stage in the disease, educated HIV individuals, and encouraged individuals in both urban and rural areas to get tested and seek methods of prevention. New technologies have the power to motivate and remind people to visit a clinic for HIV testing. Recommendations. Mobile and standalone testing sites may receive more traffic in high-volume locations such as schools and shopping centers during the week and at religious institutions or parks on the weekends. Door-to-door testing may be more effective during certain hours of the day. The gap in gender may have some closure if the local government enacts legislation that makes it mandatory for children under the age of 18 to get tested for HIV, or if young men are provided with an incentive to get tested. Radio. Because radio stations are widely broadcast across South Africa's urban and rural populations, MSF could increase the population's knowledge of the HIV/AIDS epidemic through weekly public broadcasts that provide information about testing locations, hours, group counseling, and other operations. These were my sources, and thank you very much for tuning into my presentation about Doctors Without Borders, MSF's campaign to fight against HIV/AIDS in South Africa.